In order to be able to solve LSAT questions, you've got to be able to identify the flaw in the argument. And so for that reason today, we're going to go over several LSAT drills, specifically covering LSAT flaws. If you can identify the flaw, you can solve the question. And so today we're going to start off with question number 1. During a brief hearing on suits, an associate argues that because a witness became nervous shortly after meeting a client, the client must have caused the witness's later inconsistent statements. What is the flaw? A, the argument confuses a temporal condition with a causal relationship. B, the reasoning treats a necessary condition as though it were sufficient. C, the argument improperly infers a whole's property from its parts. Or D, the reasoning attacks the witness rather than addressing the claim. When you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but please do commit to an answer. So again, A, temporal correlation confused with causal relationship. B, confusing necessary with sufficient. C, improperly inferring the whole's property from its parts. Or D, attacking the witness rather than addressing the claim. I see some folks dropping answers in the chat. Welcome to those on TikTok. Welcome to those on Instagram. And of course, welcome to those on YouTube joining today. I see Anne says A. Autumn says A. Confusing temporal correlation. Temporal meaning time-based with a causal relationship. Denisha says A as well. Fantastic. The answer is in fact A. Simple correlation, causation, confusion. That is the flaw. That is the issue with this argument. Well done. Let's go on to number 2. So number 2, while preparing filings on Legally Blonde, a junior attorney claims that because 2 successful motions shared a formatting choice, that formatting alone ensures success in all future motions. What is the flaw? A, the argument assumes unsuccessful motions never used the same formatting. B, the argument generalizes from only 2 motions to all future ones. C, the reasoning presumes that any judge will prefer identical wording. Or D, the argument confuses the author of a motion with its subject. When you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but please do commit to an answer. I see some folks starting to drop answers into the chat. We got some folks saying A, some folks saying B. Anne says A. Then we have Autumn, Osvaldo, Denisha, all saying choice B as in Bravo. Valentina says B, generalizing from only 2 motions to all future ones. And B as in Bravo is in fact the answer. Well done. The evidence was saying because we had 2 successful motions sharing a formatting choice, that formatting alone we can generalize to assume success in all future ones. Well done. Now we're going on to question number 3. On Law and Order, a detective asserts that because 2 unrelated cases both involved rapid settlements, the legal strategies in them must have been equivalent in all relevant respects. What is the flaw? A, the reasoning assumes motives without providing supporting evidence. B, the argument confuses a conditional requirement with a guaranteed result. C, the argument draws a faulty analogy between dissimilar situations. Or D, the reasoning mistakenly infers a parts feature from the whole. So what is the flaw in this argument? When you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but please do commit to an answer. I see we have a mix of answers here. Some folks saying D, some folks saying C. I'll give folks another minute to drop an answer in. So I see Anne says D, Osvaldo says D, then Giovanna, Autumn, Valentina all saying C. So D as in Delta was a whole to part, saying that because the whole has a certain characteristic, therefore every single individual part must have that same characteristic. Like saying, for example, if a cake is sweet, then every ingredient in the cake must also be sweet, which would be flawed, of course, because it's possible that some ingredients in a cake like flour or a pinch of salt, for example, might not be sweet, even if the cake as a whole is sweet. But this argument, in fact, is talking about comparing two unrelated cases that have one thing in common, and then assuming that they must be common in every way. So the answer is, in fact, C as in Charlie for number 3. Congrats, well done to those of you who got it. On to question number 4. Number 4, during a negotiation on Better Call Saul, a lawyer claims that if a client refuses any settlement, then the lawyer must have guaranteed a trial victory. Otherwise, the client would not refuse. What is the answer? ID the flaw. A, the argument improperly equates correlation with guaranteed causation. B, the reasoning presumes the truth of the very claim it seeks to prove. C, the argument offers a false dilemma by restricting the available options. Or D, the reasoning commits a mistaken reversal of a conditional relationship. When you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but please do commit to an answer. Note the conditional statements that we have going on here. A lawyer claims that if a client refuses any settlement, so the if indicates sufficient condition, then the lawyer must have guaranteed a trial victory. So if the client refuses, the lawyer must have guaranteed a trial victory. Otherwise, the client would not refuse. So what is the issue with this argument? What is the flaw? So the lawyer is claiming, meaning they are drawing that conclusion. We then have this otherwise statement. The otherwise statement at the very end serving as the evidence, then the claim being the conclusion of the argument. I see a mix of answers here. It looks like some folks are saying C, some folks are saying A. I see Giovanna saying A, Osvaldo and Anne both saying C. Then we have Denisha saying D. So this one's maybe a bit of a puzzler. I see a variety of answers. I see Passion saying A. So A saying correlation causation, saying that because there's an association between two things, therefore one must cause the other. Saying that because we have a relationship or two things coexisting, that therefore they have a causal relationship. I see Valentina also saying A, but I don't really see a correlation here. We have conditionals, but there's no general vague association between two parts here. Some folks also said choice C as in Charlie, but there's no false dilemma here. Either the client refuses or they don't refuse. Not a whole lot of middle ground between those two. So I think it's reasonable to say we either have them refusing or not refusing. In fact, I know this is a bit of a tricky one here, but I'm going to say the answer is in fact D as in Delta, a mistaken reversal of a conditional relationship, because the evidence of saying otherwise the client would not refuse, then the lawyer is making a claim that is contrary to that, reversing the negation, right? So they're negating without reversing an improper contrapositive being taken here. So the answer here is in fact D. The otherwise at the very end was serving as the evidence. And then the first sentence with the if that the lawyer is claiming is serving as the conclusion. So D as in Delta is in fact the answer. Really tricky one, folks. No worries if you didn't get this one. We'll keep going and you'll get more of these with practice over time. Of course, feel free to drop any general questions about flaws or conditionals, and I'm happy to address them. On to number 5 here. On The Good Wife, an investigator argues that a report must be reliable because it cites information from a reliable division, even though other divisions authored most of the conclusions. What is the flaw? A, the reasoning confuses the reliability of the whole with that of a part. B, the argument questions the division's competence instead of the report's content. C, the argument infers the reliability of the entire report from one reliable division. Or D, the reasoning assumes that any unreliable section would be removed from the report. When you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but please do commit to an answer. So again, A, B, C, or D, what is the flaw? In general, I always recommend trying to pre-phrase or predict the flaw for yourself before looking for a description of the flaw in the choices. It's a lot easier to ID the flaw once you already have your own sense of what the flaw is. It'll be easier to spot it once you have your own understanding for yourself. So I see some folks starting to drop answers in here. Nathan says C, Passion says C. Autumn, Anne, Osvaldo, Zuli all saying C, Giovanna saying C. Well done, folks. The answer is in fact C as in Charlie. They infer the reliability of the entire report from one reliable division. They're over-indexing themselves on that single reliable division. Maybe the other divisions are unreliable, for example, so we can't make a broad generalization from a sample that might be unrepresentative. Well done, folks. We're 5 questions in so far. Out of these first 5, please drop in the chat how many you got right. Were you 5 for 5? If you came a little late, were you 4 for 4? If you only did 4, were you 3 for 4, for example? Whatever you got, just drop in the chat to give us a sense of where you're at so far. Get a gauge of where you're at so we can see how to adjust the difficulty going forward. On to number 6. During a deposition in suits, an attorney asserts that only authentic documents are admissible and concludes that any inadmissible document must therefore be inauthentic. What is the flaw? A, the argument presumes that any authentic document has already been admitted. B, the reasoning commits a mistaken negation of a conditional statement, of a conditional requirement. C, the argument attacks the source of documents rather than their contents. Or D, the reasoning assumes that admissibility guarantees a document's persuasive force. When you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer since, of course, you'll also have to commit on test day. Again, ideally, you're going into this already having your own general sense of what the flaw is, what the issue is. You want to have your own idea of it to better predict or prephrase when you're evaluating the choices. You already have a sense of what to look for. A lot of answers dropping in here. Anne says B, Osvaldo says B, Nathan, Zuli, and Autumn all say B as well. Fantastic, folks. The answer is in fact B, a mistaken negation. They said only authentic ones are admissible. Therefore, any inadmissible document must be inauthentic, improperly confusing necessary and sufficient conditions. Being authentic was necessary does not mean that it is sufficient, though. So well done, folks who chose B. That is, in fact, the answer. On to number 7 now. On Law and Order, a prosecutor argues that one unreliable witness shows the entire investigative team must be unreliable. What is the flaw? A, the argument generalizes the unreliability of one witness to the entire team. B, the reasoning assumes that unreliable investigators will inevitably produce contradictory reports. C, the argument claims that the team's motives are improper without evidence. Or D, the reasoning presumes that any reliable team would never disagree internally. When you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but please do commit to an answer. I see some folks starting to drop answers in the chat here. Awesome. I see Julian and Beth both saying A. Fantastic. I see Nathan, Passion, Valentina, Autumn, Osvaldo, Anne, Zuli, Giovanna all saying A. Well done, folks. The answer is in fact A. Improper overgeneralization. Just because one witness is unreliable doesn't mean that everyone must be unreliable. Well done. On to number 8 now. So for number 8, during a strategy meeting on Better Call Saul, a lawyer states that because a client declined a plea deal, the only explanation is that the client is certain of acquittal. What is the flaw? The argument ignores alternative reasons a client might reject a plea deal. B, the reasoning concludes that all pleas are disadvantageous in similar cases. C, the argument treats the client's certainty as a necessary condition for trial. Or D, the reasoning claims that only 2 possible verdicts exist in criminal trials. When you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but please do commit to an answer now since, of course, you'll also have to commit on test day. So again, the conclusion says they're assuming the only explanations that the client is certain of acquittal. Maybe there are other reasons. Of course, they might reject a plea deal. Maybe they just believe they're innocent and don't want to say that they're guilty when they're not, of course. So a sense of justice. And we have a ton of folks saying choice A. Well done. Valentina says A. Osvaldo says A. Autumn, Giovanna, Zuli, Nathan, Passion all saying A. Well done, folks. The answer is in fact A. Nicely done. On to number 9. While preparing a brief on The Good Wife, an associate claims that a statute must be vague because critics who previously misread similar statutes now disapprove of this one. What is the flaw? A, the reasoning assumes that past misreadings caused the statute's current defects. B, the argument dismisses the critics' concerns because they misread prior statutes. C, the reasoning treats legislative intent as irrelevant to statutory clarity. Or D, the argument treats critics' disapproval as sufficient evidence that the statute is vague. When you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but please do commit to an answer now, since of course you're going to have to commit on test day as well. I see some answers starting to come in. Again, look at what's the evidence, what's the conclusion, and what's the disconnect between the two. So evidence is saying critics disapprove, and they previously misread similar statutes, and because they disapprove, therefore, the associate claims, the statute must be vague. So the answer is in fact D. Well done, folks. I see Nathan says D, Valentina, Giovanna, Autumn, Marlo, all saying D. Fantastic, folks. The answer is in fact D. Because the critics disapprove, therefore, they assume the statute must be vague. Well done, John. Of course, yes, the answer is D as in Delta. Well done. On to number 10. During a review session on Legally Blonde, a lawyer argues that an investigation is thorough simply because the final conclusion labels itself as thorough. What is the flaw? A, the argument confuses an investigation's scope with its overall effectiveness. B, the reasoning presumes the conclusion in its own support. C, the argument improperly infers part-whole equivalence. Or D, the reasoning confuses precedence with logical sufficiency. When you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but please do commit to an answer. So again, we're looking for A, B, C, or D to identify the flaw. Drop your answer in the chat. First, make a prediction or a prephrase on your own for what you think the flaw is. So the conclusion labels itself as thorough. Therefore, the investigation is in fact thorough. So there's this classic logical fallacy on the LSAT called circular reasoning, where the evidence and conclusion are pretty much identical. They are presupposing what they set out to prove. And that is exactly what choice B as in Bravo says. Presumes the conclusion. They are assuming the outcome in the evidence. It's circular. They're assuming some sort of logical equivalency. Well done, folks. I see a ton of folks got it. Let's see who we got. Nathan, Anne, Zuli, Autumn, Giovanna, John, Passion, all saying B as in Bravo. The answer is in fact B. They are presuming the conclusion in their own support, presupposing what they set out to prove. Of course, you can't do that. You have to have some actual evidence backing up your claim. So we're 10 questions in so far, folks. Out of these first 10 or however many you did, please drop in the chat how many you got right. If you only did 9, let us know how many you got right out of the 9 that you did. And by the way, folks, we're doing these classes every single weekday at this same time, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central, 11 a.m. Pacific time, every single weekday, Monday through Friday. The best place to join is YouTube. You can also watch the replays here on YouTube. For those of you on TikTok, welcome. First time we're doing these on TikTok today. Hope to see you back next week. Once again, we're going to keep going, though. I see a lot of folks getting a lot of questions right. Anne got 7 for 10. Valentina got 7 for 8. Giovanna got 6 for 9. John got 3 for 4 so far. Awesome. Glad you're enjoying these. I see that we've got a question here from Valentina saying, why not A or C? So A says, confusing the scope with its overall effectiveness. That would be like saying that because the investigation was searching very widely, therefore it must be doing a great job. They're not talking about the nature or the scope of the investigation, just saying it's thorough because it's thorough. Then choice C, part to whole, unlike the other flaws we did earlier that were in fact part to whole, this one is not narrowing in on a specific portion and saying, based on that, therefore the whole must have the same characteristic. So that's why it's not A or C. I see Autumn got 8 out of 10. We're doing great, folks, here. And by the way, folks, if you ever want to talk through your situation, you can book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me at unpluggedprep.com/start. Link below the video on YouTube. Link in my bio on Instagram and TikTok. I see Beth got 4 out of 5 so far. Awesome. I see KHRM is 1 for 1 so far. That's great, folks. We're going to keep going here on to number 11. So on number 11, we're looking at another suits example. On suits, a partner argues that because a client approved one cost-saving measure, the client must approve all similar measures in the future. What is the flaw? The argument falsely equates cost savings with legal compliance. B, the reasoning assumes the partner decides all measures. C, the argument generalizes from one measure to all comparable measures. Or D, the reasoning infers future motives from past conduct. When you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but please do commit to an answer now, since of course you're going to have to on test day. Better to make mistakes now so you don't make them on test day. And if you lost count, that's okay. We're all just here to learn, right? So keep going forward. Don't look backwards, just look forwards. So again, the evidence, the client approved one cost-saving measure, so therefore they must approve all similar ones in the future. This one's a little bit tricky. I see some folks are getting it, some are not sure. We got a mix of C's and D's here. So D as in Delta, inferring all future motives from past conduct. So yes, there is a past future assumption here that what happened in the past will also happen in the future, but are they assuming future motives or are they assuming future behavior? Motives and behavior are two different things. Motives just being motivation, of course. But they're assuming that what happened in the past will happen in the future. They're generalizing from one specific cost-saving measure to their approval of all similar measures in the future. So the answer is in fact C as in Charlie. And I see here, John got it, Marlo got it, Passion got it, Autumn got it, and ultimately got it correct. Well done, folks. The answer is in fact C as in Charlie. Well done. A little bit tricky, but and of course, folks, if you ever want to talk through any of these questions, you want to talk through your LSAT situation, I'm always happy to help. You can book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me through the link in my bio or the link in the description below this video. On to number 12. During a hearing on law and order, a detective concludes that because a policy requires supervisor approval for any arrest, the presence of approval guarantees that the arrest met all legal standards. What is the flaw? A, the reasoning claims that approval alone determines legality. B, the argument assumes approval is merely a formality. C, the argument treats a necessary condition as sufficient. Or D, the reasoning faults the policy for being too demanding. When you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but please do commit to something. And first, of course, try to prephrase for yourself, make a prediction in your own words, articulated for yourself of what you think the flaw might be. They're saying the policy requires supervisor approval for any request, any arrest. Therefore, if we have the approval, it guarantees they met all legal standards. So approval is necessary doesn't mean approval is sufficient or that approval guarantees that we met the standards, right? So this is necessary, sufficient confusion. I see a lot of folks got it. Awesome. I see Nathan, Anne, Marlo, Passion, Valentina, Autumn, Giovanna, all saying choice C as in Charlie. The answer is in fact C, folks. Well done. It treats a necessary condition, the supervisor approval, as being sufficient. Well done. On to number 13. On The Good Wife, an analyst asserts that because evidence from one source contradicted itself, all evidence from any source must be unreliable. What is the flaw? A, the argument claims contradiction is intentional deception. B, the reasoning infers one inconsistency undermines all evidence. C, the argument concludes no source can ever provide complete information. Or D, the reasoning presumes consistency with prior verdicts is required. When you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. Commit now. You'll have to commit on test day. Better to get into the habit now and see where you stand. Don't hedge it any bets. Pick something, commit, drop it in the chat. Let us know where you're at. So again, in the argument, they said evidence from one source contradicted itself. So one source was unreliable. Therefore, all evidence from any source must be unreliable. Pretty extreme claim. Just because one person was not perfect, therefore nobody's reliable at all, period. One person made one mistake, and we're generalizing based on that. So yes, the answer is in fact B. They're inferring or assuming that one inconsistency undermines all evidence, period. I see a ton of folks got it. Nathan, Anne, Giovanna, Marlo, Autumn, Valentina, Jalai all saying choice B as in Bravo. The answer is in fact B. Well done, folks. We're doing great here. On to number 14. During negotiations on Better Call Saul, an attorney argues that opposing counsel's proposed timeline must be flawed because opposing counsel stands to gain from delay. What is the flaw? A, the argument assumes delay benefits both parties equally. B, the reasoning concludes delay will occur in every case. C, the argument faults the proposal for lacking calculations. Or D, the reasoning dismisses the proposal by attacking motives. What is the flaw? When you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark. So what are they doing? They're saying the timeline must be flawed because opposing counsel stands to gain from delay. So they are attacking the source, not the substance. This is an ad hominem personal attack. Invalid, of course, we've got to look at the arguments on their merits, not attack based on personal incentives. I see a ton of folks got it. We got Nathan saying D, Zuli, Anne, Giovanna, Marlo, Passion, all saying D as in Delta. Dismissing the proposal by attacking the motives. The answer is in fact D. Autumn and Valentina got it as well. Fantastic. The answer is D, attacking the source, attacking the person. Formal name for this flaw is ad hominem. On to number 15. While preparing an appeal on Legally Blonde, a junior lawyer argues that because two procedural errors occurred together once, the presence of one error now ensures the presence of the other. What is the flaw? A, the argument generalizes from one co-occurrence to a guaranteed link. B, the reasoning asserts one error caused the other. C, the argument treats absence as impossible. Or D, the reasoning presumes rules forbid separation. When you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. So two things occurred together. That is a correlation or association. Then they are concluding that the presence of one ensures the presence of the other. That is, of course, assuming a causal relationship, meaning the answer is A, generalizing from one to a guaranteed link. The answer is in fact A. Well done, of course. I see a ton of folks got it. Anne, Nathan, Zuli, Passion, Giovanna, Dua Akbar, welcome. Autumn, all saying choice A. Yes, the answer is in fact A. A is just a fancy way of referring to a correlation causation flaw. Generalizing from a co-occurrence in association to the guaranteed link, meaning the causal relationship. So yes, the answer is A. Passion asks, why not B? The reasoning asserts one error caused the other. So they're saying that because two errors occurred together once, the presence of one now ensures the presence of the other. So what B is doing is B is just saying the reasoning asserts a causal relationship, but it's missing the correlational element there. It's not covering the association, and that's truly the issue here. So B is addressing part of it, but not all of it. Nathan says the LSAT is my passion. Awesome. It's my passion too, of course, while I'm here. It's why I'm here. Glad you're enjoying this and finding it helpful. Yeah, so B was incomplete. A is more comprehensive. So we're 15 in so far, folks. Out of these first 15, please update us on where you stand, how many you got right out of these 15. Did you get all of them right? Most of them right? If you got a handful wrong, that's of course okay. We're just here to learn. We're all looking to improve over time. When you let us know where you stand, I'll read it out just to get a sense of where you're all doing. If you got 14 for 14, awesome, I see, and got 12 for 15. That's great, pretty solid accuracy. A lot of these are tough. Some are easier than others, but we're all just here to learn. Giovanna got 10 for 14, also pretty solid. Well done, folks. On to number 16. So for 16, in Legally Blonde, a professor claims that because 2 students attended her review session scored high, attending review sessions causes top performance. What is the flaw? The argument conflates correlation with causation. B, the reasoning attacks the students instead of the methods. C, the argument assumes identical instruction. Or D, the reasoning treats a necessary condition as sufficient. Again, make a prephrase, make a prediction. It's a lot easier if you already have your own idea of the flaw in order to better spot it in the choices. So 2 students who attended scored high. Attending the sessions caused top performance. So this is another version of a post hoc fallacy, assuming that because one thing came before the other thing, therefore the first thing caused the second thing. Post hoc ergo propter hoc is the formal term for this fallacy. It is a specific form of a correlation causation flaw. And that's exactly what choice A says. I see a ton of you got it. Awesome. Nathan says A. Anne, Marlo, Zuli, Autumn, Passion, Giovanna, Dua Akbar, all saying choice A. Valentina says A as well. Fantastic, folks. The answer is in fact A, confusing correlation with causation. Because there's an association, therefore they're assuming one caused the other. Well done. On to number 17. In Suits, an associate argues that because one rushed filing led to serious errors, all rushed filings compromise accuracy. What is the flaw? A, the argument treats one filing as identical to all. B, the reasoning generalizes from one example. C, the argument assumes speed is the only factor. Or D, the reasoning assumes errors are always intentional. When you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. I see a lot of folks dropping answers in here. Awesome. We got Anne, Dua Akbar, Valentina, Passion, Nathan, Zuli, Autumn, Marlo, all saying B as in Bravo. And the answer is in fact B as in Bravo. They are generalizing from one example. They're saying that because of this one rushed filing leading to serious errors, therefore all rushed filings will also lead to serious errors. Well done, folks. You're doing great. On to number 18. A judge on The Good Wife claims that a defendant who volunteers for community service must be honest because another volunteer proved trustworthy. What is the flaw? A, the argument treats volunteers as a homogeneous group. B, the reasoning assumes honesty causes volunteering. C, the argument draws a conclusion from a weak comparison. Or D, the reasoning infers temporal order. When you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. So a defendant who volunteers must be honest because another one proved trustworthy. So because the other one was trustworthy, therefore this one must also prove trustworthy. So we have a couple folks dropping answers in here, some saying A, some saying C, someone saying why isn't it B? So Dua Akbar says, why isn't it B? Why doesn't honesty cause volunteering? Well, that's not, so of course it would be bad for them to assume that honesty caused volunteering, but they're not saying that in this argument. They're saying that one person who volunteers must be honest because another one was trustworthy. So they're saying because of this previous person, therefore this other person must have that same characteristic. Improper to make that assumption though, but they're not saying that there's a causal relationship between volunteering and being honest. Now they're saying that because a previous person was trustworthy, therefore this other volunteer must also be trustworthy as well. Are they saying all volunteers are a homogeneous group? No, they're saying that one other individual is trustworthy because the first was trustworthy also. So they're not saying every volunteer in the world will have that characteristic, but they're saying based on this one example, another will be similar in a key way. And so for that reason, the answer is in fact C as in Charlie, drawing a conclusion from a weak comparison. We have a single example, and they're drawing a conclusion far too broadly on that basis, going far too extreme based on that. So the answer is, in fact, C as in Charlie. Ton of folks got it. Anne, Zuli, Passion, Jalaijan, Marlowe, awesome, Valentina as well. The answer is, in fact, C. A is really tempting, of course, but they're not saying all volunteers are the same. But their conclusion's too strong based on one single example. So I'd say overgeneralization is the best way to describe it. This is the clearest way. Number 19, in Better Call Saul, a lawyer asserts that since a witness contradicted herself once, none of her statements can be accurate. What's the flaw? A, the reasoning assumes contradiction equals deception. B, the argument confuses minor inconsistencies with unreliability. C, the reasoning presumes perfect detail is required. Or D, the argument treats a flaw in one part as undermining all. When you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. And pre-phrase, predict if you can. It makes things so much easier. So she contradicted herself once, therefore nothing she says could possibly be accurate. Drawing a really broad conclusion based on one single case. So this is a version of part to whole. Again, overgeneralization. The answer is, in fact, D as in Delta. And a ton of you got it. Anne, Giovanna, Nathan, Zuli, Autumn, Marlowe, Jay, all saying D as in Delta. Dua Akbar said A or D. The answer is, in fact, D. Valentina also got it. Well done. Dua Akbar asks, what are the key points you note in the paragraph to get the right answer? Well, I basically look at what's the evidence, what's the conclusion, and what's the gap between the two. How is it possible for the evidence to be true, yet for the conclusion to be false? Because, of course, they're telling us it's flawed, meaning the conclusion does not logically follow from the evidence. There must be a gap or a problem in some way. And I try to note to myself, well, if someone were saying this to me in ordinary conversation, what would be problematic about what they said? What's the gap? What's the flaw? Why are they wrong? Try to predict it for yourself. It makes evaluating the choices so much easier. Passion says, my brain says C, but my brain's processing is questionable. Okay, it's going to get better over time. So C as in Charlie here says, the reasoning presumes perfect detail is required. They never required perfection. Their issue was with the witness contradicting herself, which they shouldn't have done. And so that's really the major issue with this, is that she made one single mistake. They're not saying that they had to have perfection necessarily, although I could see why you would draw that. But the real issue here is that because she made a mistake, she's not reliable in any sense. So one issue, one mistake that she made undermines her reliability in general. But the undermining her reliability in general was the conclusion here, which is why D fits it better. Good question, though. Number 20, on Law and Order, a detective concludes that because suspects who deny involvement sometimes turn out guilty, anyone who denies involvement is likely guilty. What's the flaw? A, the argument extends a pattern from some to all. B, the reasoning ignores guilt without denial. C, the argument presumes denial is necessary for guilt. Or D, the reasoning confuses shared behavior with cause. What's the flaw? When you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. And if you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to something. So again, we're looking at the evidence and the conclusion and what's the gap. So those who deny involvement sometimes turn out guilty. Therefore, anyone who denies involvement is probably guilty. So overgeneralization, confusing some with all, over-broadening their statements beyond what they reasonably should based on the evidence. Some to all, the answer is in fact A, and I see a ton of you got it. Awesome. We got Anne, Nathan, Dua Akbar, Passion, Zuli, Autumn, Jay, Giovanna, all saying A. The answer is in fact A, extending from some to all, improper overgeneralization. Well done, folks. We're 20 questions in so far. We're doing great. Out of these 20, please note how many you got correct out of the ones that you did. So if you only got to do a handful of them, let's say you only did 15, how many did you get right out of the 15 you did? Maybe you got 12 out of 15. Maybe you got 15 for 15. Awesome. Whatever you got, please drop it in the chat. Update us on where you're at. If you find these classes helpful, we're doing them every single weekday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, same time as today. If you find these helpful, please spread the word. The only way this grows is through word of mouth. I don't do any advertising for these live classes, and the algorithm doesn't really promote them because they can't run ads during a live. And so if you want this to grow, the more that these grow, the more that people show up, the more I will expand these classes and do more and more of them over time. You can always access the recordings on the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel. We've done about a dozen of these so far. We're going to do a whole lot more. Please spread the word. Really appreciate your support. We got Anne got 17 out of 20. Autumn got 17 for 20 as well. You guys are twins. Valentina 16 for 18. Giovanna 14 for 19. Awesome. Dua Akbar got 7 for 10. Awesome. Do I do one-on-one classes? Yes, I do. You can book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me at unpluggedprep.com/start. Link below the video on YouTube. Link in the bio on socials, Instagram, and TikTok. On to number 21. On suits, a partner argues that because a missed deadline always voids a contract, all avoided contracts must result from missed deadlines. What is the flaw? A, the argument assumes no other causes for voiding exist. B, the reasoning confuses sufficient and necessary conditions. C, the argument presumes deadlines are irrelevant. Or D, the reasoning infers intent from circumstance. When you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. Got a lot of folks dropping answers in here. Awesome. We've got Anne saying A, Passion saying A, Giovanna, Dua Akbar, Autumn, Valentina, Jay all saying A. The argument assumes no other causes for voiding exist. We've also got Nathan and Zuli saying B. And the funny thing is that both A and B here are actually correct. So when you confuse necessary and sufficient conditions, you are at the same time saying there was no other valid cause or reason behind this. And so you get a point if you chose either A or B because they're both ways of saying the exact same thing. Now, Dua Akbar is asking, are these questions random or part of previous LSAT flaw questions? And so yes, they are built around common flaws on the LSAT. There are not actual LSAT questions, of course. There's copyright issues with that. We go over real ones in our programs, in our courses, in our coaching. But for these free live classes, we can't release LSAT content due to copyright. We don't want to get sued. So they're testing flaws. They're testing LSAT logic, but they're not actual LSAT questions. Well done, folks. On to 22. In Legally Blonde, a student reasons that because two fashion-related cases produced similar rulings, all such cases must follow the same legal pattern. What's the flaw? A, the argument assumes similar cases share all features. B, the reasoning infers fashion law is exempt from general principles. C, the argument overgeneralizes from two cases. Or D, the reasoning treats branding as causally responsible. When you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. So two cases had similar rulings. Therefore, all such cases must follow the same legal pattern. So based on these two being similar, therefore, all must be similar in the same way. I see some folks said A, some folks said C. I'm going to go with C, overgeneralization. A lot of you got it. And so here we have Anne got C, Nathan, Autumn, Passion, Giovanna, Valentina, Marlo, all saying C. Zuli says C. I know some folks said A and C. For example, Jay said A and C. Dua Akbar said A and C, said A. And so A is really close, but they're not assuming that any similar case shares all features. They're saying that these two cases produced similar rulings. Therefore, all such cases follow the same legal pattern. So it was the similar rulings, not that they were similar cases. And these were both fashion related specifically. So we're talking about these two particular ones and then overgeneralizing based on them. On to number 23. In The Good Wife, an attorney argues that because a corporate policy applies company-wide, each employee must share the corporation's priorities. What is the flaw? A, the argument assumes policy determines all behavior. B, the reasoning presumes employees wrote the policy. C, the argument generalizes about a group from one member. Or D, the reasoning applies a whole's property to each part. When you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. We had a question from Jay asking, wouldn't assuming mean overgeneralizing? Sometimes, yes. For the previous question, I would say yes. The issue with the previous question was the earlier part of the choice. If you ever want to discuss any of these, by the way, you can book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me at unpluggedprep.com/start, and we can talk through your particulars in more detail. So let's look at this one here. I see a ton of answers coming in. Some folks saying A, some saying C, some saying D. Now, there is a part to whole thing going on here, but let's look at the specifics. And so they're saying that the policy applies company-wide, and so each individual employee shares the same priorities. So because the whole has a characteristic, each individual part, each individual member has the same ideas. So choice C is saying, generalizing from a group about a group based on one member, that's going from the member to the group. C is going from the group to the member. Opposites. C and D are saying opposite things. They're both talking about whole and part and whole, but different directionality. Choice A is talking about behavior. Nothing in the argument really talks about behavior. They talk about priorities. And so the best answer here would be D as in delta, applying the whole's property to each part, to each individual employee. I see some folks got it. Autumn says D. Dua Akbar says D. Zuli says D as well. Fantastic, folks. Tricky question. On to 24. In Better Call Saul, a lawyer argues that a client's refusal to discuss motives proves wrongdoing. What is the flaw? A, the argument treats refusal as evidence of guilt. B, the reasoning assumes improper motives determine liability. C, the argument infers all clients must discuss motives. And D, the reasoning presumes disclosure would exonerate. When you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. The client refused to discuss motives, therefore there was wrongdoing. That's what they're claiming here. Evidence conclusion. So what's problematic about this? Just because they won't talk, does that mean they're automatically guilty? Of course not. You can plead the fifth, right? I see a ton of folks got this. So we have a ton of folks saying A, Passion, Nathan, Zuli, Anne, Giovanna, Osvaldo, Autumn, all saying A. Fantastic. The answer is in fact A. Valentina gets it as well. I saw there was a question regarding choice C. Infers all clients must discuss motives. Yeah, it's saying that clients should discuss their motives, but what is missing in C is the wrongdoing part. If they said all clients must discuss motives or else they're guilty or else they committed wrongdoing. C is leaving that out. It's incomplete. So therefore, it's not an accurate description of what's going on in this argument, not properly describing the flaw. On to 25. On Law and Order, a detective claims that because two suspects share a behavior pattern, that pattern must be the cause of the crime. What is the flaw? A, the argument presumes similar people commit the same crime. B, the reasoning confuses accompanying pattern with cause. C, the argument concludes crime occurred because possible. D, the reasoning relies on character, not evidence. So when you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. To share a behavior pattern, that pattern must be the cause. So we have an association between two people having the same pattern. Therefore, that has a causal relationship with the crime occurring. I see a ton of folks got it. Nathan, Autumn, Anne, Zuli, Valentina, Passion, Marlo, Osvaldo, Giovanna, all saying B. B is in fact correct. Well done. A was tempting. A lot of folks chose A, but it's incorrect because it's not dealing with the correlation causation relationship. It's just saying similar people, same crime, but are they saying that the similarity caused the crime, that the pattern in behavior caused the crime? That's missing from 25, from choice A. So we're 25 questions in so far. Out of these 25, please drop in the chat how many you got right out of the ones you did. Give us a sense of how you're doing on these, how many you're getting right, what's your accuracy level overall. And by the way, folks, if you're studying for the LSAT, if you're looking to get a top score in January, February, April, June, or beyond, and you're looking for help, you want to talk through your action plan, your study plan, you can book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me personally at unpluggedprep.com/start. Link is below the video on YouTube. Link is in my bio on TikTok and Instagram. Totally free tutoring lesson, no obligation. You can book that call with me. And if you find these lessons helpful, of course, these free classes, we do them every single weekday at this same time, 2 Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific. Please spread the word. I see folks are doing great here. Valentina got 21 out of 23. Autumn got 22 out of 25. Nathan's at 18 out of 20. Dua Akbar's 10 out of 15. You guys are getting pretty high accuracy. A lot of these are tough. We're going to keep going. On to number 26. In suits, a senior partner argues that because a new associate made one incorrect inference, the entire analysis must be flawed. What is the flaw? A, the argument assumes experience equals reliability. B, the reasoning presumes one good inference proves accuracy. C, the argument generalizes from one error. Or D, the reasoning infers motives from outcome. So when you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. All right, so I see some answers coming in here. Looking great. Okay, so Nathan, Dua Akbar, Passion, Osvaldo, Autumn, Zuli, Valentina, all saying choice C. The argument generalizes from one error. Marlo's got C as well. Yes, the answer is in fact C. One associate made one mistake, therefore everything is flawed. They're overgeneralizing, expanding beyond the scope. This is also, by the way, a version of part to whole. Because one individual part was inaccurate, therefore they're saying the whole thing must be inaccurate. Maybe the rest was good, though. Well done. On to number 27. On Legally Blonde, a classmate insists that since 2 high GPA students excelled in moot court, all high GPA students will excel. What's the flaw? A, the argument assumes moot court success is required for high GPA. B, the reasoning infers GPA is irrelevant to advocacy. C, the argument presumes identical traits among successful students. Or D, the argument generalizes from 2 students. So when you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to something. Commit now, since you'll have to commit on test day. Better to get into the habit now. So that we have a sample of 2. 2 with high GPAs excelled in moot court. Therefore, everyone with a high GPA is going to excel in moot court. Again, once again, they are overgeneralizing beyond the scope. Just because 2 did doesn't mean that every single one's going to do it. A lot of folks got it here. We got Zuli, Dua Akbar, Nathan, Passion, Giovanna, Autumn, Valentina, Osvaldo, all saying D as in Delta. The answer is in fact D, folks. Well done. You got it. Nice job. On to number 28 here. In The Good Wife, a prosecutor argues that because a document lists only 2 procedural options, no other alternatives exist. What is the flaw? A, the reasoning treats a list as exhaustive. B, the argument confuses policy with causation. C, the reasoning relies on analogy. Or D, the argument assumes that if it's allowed, therefore it is required, or being allowed equals being required. So when you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark. But do commit to something. Commit now, because of course you'll have to commit on test day as well. The document lists only 2 procedural options, therefore no other alternatives exist. So there's this classic logical fallacy called the false dilemma, meaning like you're either with us or you're against us, failing to consider no middle ground. And so even if only 2 options are listed on the document, maybe there were others that were possible, other possibilities that were not listed there, but could well be valid options to pursue. I see a ton of folks here got it. Let's see here. Nathan says A. Zuli says A. Autumn says A as well. Passion says A. Giovanna says A. Marlo says A. Got some folks unsure, choosing other options. But yes, the answer is in fact A. They are treating this list as exhaustive, failing to consider other possibilities. I see someone and chose C, relying on analogy. But there's no analogy here. There's no other situation being compared to this one. Everything in the argument is contained within the topic or the scope of this particular situation. So the answer, in fact, here was A, false dilemma, treating the list as being exhaustive. Well done, folks. On to number 29. On Better Call Saul, an investigator claims that because two lawyers manipulated evidence, a third lawyer from the same firm must do so as well. So what's the flaw? The argument infers firm character from individuals. B, the reasoning infers personal behavior from colleagues. C, the argument concludes manipulation occurred because it was possible. Or D, the reasoning presumes misconduct means inevitable loss. So when you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. So because two lawyers manipulated evidence, therefore, a third lawyer from the same firm must do so as well. I see some folks choosing A, some folks saying B. A is like saying hold apart, that or part to whole, that because each individual has a certain characteristic, therefore the firm as a whole must have that same characteristic, which I could see why it's tempting, but and it's possible that instead here they're only going from the two lawyers to an additional third one. Nathan's asking, are they the whole firm? We don't know, right? So the safest course of action here is to assume a limited scope and saying that we are assuming an individual's behavior from that of their colleagues, which B as in Bravo better fits. And so Osvaldo, Giovanna, Nathan, Valentina, Passion all got it. The answer is in fact B. They're assuming that someone's behavior based on the behavior of their colleagues, that because your peers have certain characteristics, therefore you will have those same characteristics as well. So yes, the answer in fact here was B, folks. Well done. We're on the right track here. On to number 30. On Law and Order, a detective argues that because the suspect's statement assumes credibility, the suspect must be credible. What is the flaw? A, the argument confuses precondition with guaranteed result. B, the reasoning relies on alleged statistics. C, the argument uses the conclusion to support its premise. Or D, the reasoning assumes confidence equals truth. So when you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to something. Commit now, because you'll have to commit on test day. Better to get it wrong now and learn from it so that you don't get it wrong when it actually matters on test day itself. So we have a mix of answers here. Some folks saying A, some saying B, some saying C, some saying D. So across the board here. Right away now I'll knock out choice B, alleged statistics. There's nothing here around data or numbers or stats, and so we can knock that one out. If we could make a pre-phrase or prediction about what the flaw is here, the statement assumes credibility, therefore the suspect must be credible. The closest thing we have going on here is circular reasoning, confusing the evidence with the conclusion. Basically, there's no actual evidence being advanced here. The evidence and conclusion here are identical, pretty much the same, with no distinction between the two. Of course, you can't do that. You've got to have some actual evidence backing up your statement. So I'm going to go with choice C as in Charlie as being the best answer here. Osvaldo got it. Ted Jeep got it. Nathan got it. D as in Delta, confidence equaling truth. That's like saying because you are confident in what you say, therefore it must be correct, or because someone speaks confidently, therefore it's got to be right. We can't necessarily back that up or say that. So it's a little bit confused so D as in Delta does not really accurately describe what's going on here. So C is the best answer. On to 31. During a case briefing in Legally Blonde, A student argues that because two interns who studied in groups earned high grades, group study guarantees high performance. What is the flaw? A, the argument generalizes from two cases. B, the argument ignores students who don't benefit from groups. C, the reasoning presumes group study is the only method. Or D, the argument confuses effort with ability. When you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. I'll give folks a minute to drop some answers in. By the way, folks, we're doing these every single weekday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central, 11 Pacific. If you find these helpful, please spread the word. The only way these classes grow is through word of mouth. The more this grows, the more classes I'll keep doing, the more I'll expand this over time. Ton of answers coming in here. Zuli says A, Nathan, Osvaldo, Autumn, Giovanna, Valentina, Passion, Marlo, Ted Jeep, all saying A. Overgeneralizing from two individual cases, not necessarily representative. The answer is in fact A. Well done. On to 32. In Suits, an associate claims that because a rival firm won cases after adopting new software, the software must be responsible. What is the flaw? A, the argument assumes skill never matters. B, the reasoning infers causation from sequence. C, the argument presumes technology always improves compliance. Or D, the argument overlooks procedural differences across courts. When you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark. So they got the new software, then they won cases, therefore the software was the reason they won. I see a couple folks here chose C as in Charlie. Technology always improves compliance. But here's the thing. Are they saying tech always improves it? Or just that the tech was responsible in this case? C is accusing the argument of going far beyond what it actually was saying. The argument was just saying the software was responsible this particular time. It came before it, therefore it caused it. The software came first, then they won. Therefore, the software caused them to win. So it's causation from sequence, correlation causation, specifically post hoc fallacy. Ton of folks got it. Nathan, Osvaldo, Autumn, Marlo, Giovanna, Passion, Valentina all said B. The answer is in fact B. Well done, folks. On to 33. While preparing a memo on The Good Wife, an attorney argues that because one investigator mishandled evidence, the entire unit is unreliable. What is the flaw? A, the argument equates one role with leadership. B, the argument presumes mishandling is always intentional. C, the argument infers whole from part. Or D, the reasoning ignores corrective training. When you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. One investigator mishandled, therefore the entire unit is unreliable. Because part of the unit is unreliable, one investigator, therefore the entire unit is unreliable as well. Part to whole flaw, classic logical fallacy. Ton of folks got it. Osvaldo says C, Passion, Giovanna, Zuli, Autumn, Nathan all saying C, Valentina saying C, fantastic. The answer is in fact C, improperly inferring what is true of the whole based on an individual part. One person might screw up, but the whole unit as a whole could still be okay and the rest of the folks could be fine. Nice. On to number 34. During a strategy meeting in Better Call Saul, a paralegal asserts that because a witness contradicted herself once, none of her statements should be trusted. What is the flaw? The argument overgeneralizes from one contradiction. B, the reasoning assumes contradiction equals dishonesty. C, the argument treats lack of corroboration as proof of non-occurrence. Or D, the reasoning ignores possible clarification. When you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark, but do commit to an answer. So a witness contradicted herself once, therefore we shouldn't trust anything that she says. I see some answers coming in here. Zuli says A, Osvaldo says A, Autumn, Nathan, Marlo, Valentina, Passion all saying A. Well done, folks. The answer is A, overgeneralization. a specific version of part to whole. Just because one statement was invalid or contradictory doesn't mean the whole thing is not to be trusted. The rest could still be okay. On to number 35. In Law and Order, a detective claims that if a suspect is guilty, they avoid answering questions. This suspect avoided questions, so they must be guilty. What is the flaw? When you have your answer, please drop it in the chat, A, B, C, or D. If you're not sure, just drop a question mark. So if guilty, they avoid. This person avoided, therefore they must be guilty. So this is a reversal, right? We had if guilty, then avoid, conclusion, avoid, then guilty. We're improperly reversing necessary and sufficient conditions. I see a ton of folks are dropping answers in the chat here. Zuli says D, Nathan, Valentina, Dua Akbar, Passion, Giovanna, all saying D. They're all smoothly and clearly identifying the flaw. C, the reasoning concludes guilt without evidence. They do have evidence though, but their evidence is just not properly taken, right? So they're mixing things up. I see Autumn says D as well. They are giving or trying to give evidence at least, but it's just not well done. And so they're going backwards on the arrow. Again, the reasoning would go, if guilty, then avoid. Then they're concluding avoid, therefore guilty. Confusing necessary and sufficient conditions, going backwards on the arrow. So folks, please update in the chat if you can, how many you got right out of the number that you attempted. We did 35 so far. If you did 30 for 35, drop that down. If you did 30 in total, how many did you get right out of the 30 that you did? Update us on your status. We do these classes every single weekday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, same time as today. If you find these helpful, please spread the word. The only way these classes grow is through word of mouth. I don't do any advertising for these classes. The algorithm does not boost lives because they can't run ads during them. And so the more that these grow, it's only going to happen through your spreading the word in your group chats, your forums, your Discords, Slacks, wherever you're studying with other folks. Please spread the word regarding these classes. We're going to meet again on Monday, doing a variety pack, grab bag, all different logical reasoning question types. And so see you back there on Monday, same time, same place. YouTube is the best place to join, but you can also join on TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, wherever you follow me. Really appreciate your support, folks. I'll see you all next time. Thanks for joining. Have a great weekend.